Hi, and welcome to another episode of Project Peak Performance. Today, myself, Dave Gibbons, and Ian Macbeth have got a fantastic guest on. We've got Todd Crush from America. And if you've been on any of the running groups on Facebook, certainly Runners Love Running and anything connected to that, you'll realize that this guy is an absolute hero in the running world. What he's battled with in trying to overcome schizophrenia, PTSD, and he's done this through running. He's tried medications, but running has been the number one key that has got him to the stage where he is today. So what we want to do is get him onto the show, have a bit of a chat with him, find out about his story, because this is absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure you're going to love it. So without further ado, Todd, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, mate. I'm good. Thank you. So I just, like I say, we've seen you on Facebook. We've had a bit of a chat offline. What a lovely guy you are, Todd. So I'd like to find out from you, and maybe the listeners would love to know, where are you today? What does your life look like today? Where are you, and what have you got to look forward to in the future?
I said in a post recently that there is no impossible. With determination, we become it, and I have become it. A year ago, what I'm doing right now, standing in this room, would have been completely impossible. I am in Los Angeles, California, for a speaking engagement that'll happen on Thursday, where I'll be in a room with several thousand people and also broadcast to all their satellite offices. And just traveling and running in a place I've never been is something, even a year and a half ago, I was afraid to leave my house for more than 15 minutes.
Yeah. Wow.
It's been a long journey, but that's the transition I'm in right now.
Wow. And what's the mission?
Well done on that, first of all. Congratulations.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah. If we had a crowd like that, they'd all be applauding you right now.
Yeah, it's amazing. So what's the mission? What is it you promoted? We've got the fantastic book that you've released, From Beneath the Ice.
Yeah, From Beneath the Ice is a memoir about my journey from illness to wellness. It's on Amazon. My whole mission when I started this process was to be a voice of hope, inspiration, and education to all who encounter mental illness. It's since grown a little bit further to change the way the world speaks about and treats mental illness. I talk to a lot of doctors and nurses and EMTs, people in those fields that are very curious about my point of view, because people with schizophrenia are not really often lucid enough to explain the details of what's going on when they're in a different reality. And I have that unique perspective. So there's a lot of curious medical folks out there.
Yeah. That's good.
I wanted to ask a question, if that's all right, Dave. Just knowing the story in the book and kind of, looking through some of the key points on there. Could you just describe the moment when you kind of realized that running was helping, when you realized it was making you physically and mentally feel better, and why you think that happened?
I can tell you the exact day, March 12th of last year, 2023. I went out for a run, and it was early in the morning, and about a block from my house, a man started running around and was breaking windows and setting off car alarms and yelling at me. And it took me a while to figure out, it took me a few minutes to figure out that he was a hallucination from my schizophrenia. And that day I kept running. Normally I would have gone home and isolated in a dark room with music or played my bass. But that day I stayed outside and kept running with him running around, and was out there for so long and ran so hard and so fast, like was going as fast as I could. Before I got home, before I was finished, he was gone. And I realized that day that I can not only fight this, but I can win. And that day running became my sword. For a long time it was a shield, but that day it became my sword as well.
It's a big kind of moment in someone's life to sort of feel that way, that I guess that's the biggest race of your life, will always be the biggest race of your life, that particular day, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Have you sort of gone deep into the physicality of it? Why you think, obviously, if you weren't running, you were doing some other sort of if you were cycling, or, you know, if you were hiking, or there would have been something, but it's the movement element that physically has got things going on inside your body. So I'm just intrigued if you've ever really sort of deep dived into the science of maybe what was going on there as well.
Yeah, I've been interviewed by a number of doctors, like I said, who are really curious about this, and there's a couple different opinions on that. Medication for schizophrenia has, like any medication, but kind of especially more with that kind of medication, is absorbed through a metabolic process. You usually have to eat a certain amount of protein with it to help it absorb into the brain. And one of the theories is that with exercise like this, these medications have a long half-life. I mean, they stay in your body for a long time. It's not like Advil where you take it and 4 hours later you can take it again. This lasts like 12 hours. So if you exercise anytime, that metabolism speeds up and your medication is absorbed into your brain more completely. I'm not a doctor, but that's how it's been explained to me. Another theory is that psychologically, I'm just outrunning what my brain is trying to throw at me, which is kind of where I gravitate to. I've always been that kind of like metaphysical kind of person. And for me, that's more inspiring to me anyway than some kind of scientific explanation, but it's probably a combination of a number of things.
I think so many people can relate to that. Dave, I know your wife, she likes to run. Obviously, me and Rob in the group like to run, but I think from lockdown, when lockdown happened, a lot of people found a love for running. And I think it came from exactly as you've just described it, whatever their own circumstances were of stress levels or mental health or frustrations, go for a run, either go, as I call it, go dark, no music, or go out with music or a podcast, and you just come back and you've worked through those issues. You know, is a really common thing that you see in the running community at all sorts of level, whether it's couch to 5K or you talked off camera about a 100-mile race that you've got coming your way. You know, that everyone feels that similarity of you just feel better when you've gone out for a good run.
Yeah. And, you know, we started this with where I am right now, and a really important aspect of that I left out ties into what we're talking about now. For the longest time for me, running was kind of like meditation. It's always been that, but I use that as an example that meditation is hard when you first do it, because when you sit down to meditate and try to clear your head, it just fills up with every thought you've ever had in your entire life. And that's how running was for me for a long time. I would go out there and I would have to process through all this stuff going on in my head while I was out there. And then I had to look at my notes. 140 days ago, my symptoms completely went away. I woke up, and not just the hallucinations were kind of hard to tell because I was at like a 1 week interval between hallucinations. So I couldn't tell that right away. But I woke up March 6th with mental clarity, no anxiety, no intrusive thoughts, no worst case scenario thinking. That just vanquished. And every run since that day, when I start, my mind empties out. And it's just me and my authentic self for as long as I want to go. And that's been like mind blowing. I can't describe, I've tried to figure out an analogy to what that is like, and I really can't think of one. It's like a brain transplant. I think differently. I have clarity. It's a completely different world to me.
What was it like before? Could you try to articulate what it was like beforehand?
Yeah.
It's really difficult for me to try and understand when I've tried to, you know, think about this. And if the only thing I can bring it back to is any type of hallucination, would be like I've on magic mushrooms or something like that, where things feel cool, feel okay, but you know they're completely weird. How does that look to yourself?
Yeah, I use an analogy to describe what schizophrenia is like, and the analogy I use is dreaming. So when you are having a bizarre dream, say you're dreaming about cars driving around being driven by cartoon animals, and while you're dreaming, that happens all the time and it's perfectly normal and you accept it as that's the way the world is. It's not until you wake up that you go, well, that was really weird. That's what hallucinations are like for me. When I'm going out on a run and I see something that's bizarre, I don't think it's bizarre at first. I think it just happens all the time. I've seen a man walking a penguin, which on a leash, and at first I'm like, oh, he's got a pet penguin. And then, a couple minutes later, it dawns on me that it's probably not actually there. And that escalates all the way up to a guy running around breaking windows. That time between the onset of a hallucination and my rational mind kicking in used to be 12, 18 hours. And now it's a matter of minutes, which is another thing that has gotten shorter and shorter and shorter as my running has gotten more and more.
That's amazing. And so the longer you ran, the longer the symptoms were suppressed. I take it. That's how it sounds.
Yeah, it was kind of more of an overall mileage thing. Like I went from I did it kind of quickly. I went from about 40 miles a week up to 70 over a bunch of weeks. And once I hit that 70-mile mark, that's when everything went away. And you asked what it was like before. It was more than hallucinations. I had a really terrible childhood, and that gave me this mind that had intrusive thoughts and worst case scenario thinking. So we have a teenage daughter, and she could be having a friend over that I've never met, and my mind would go into 1,000 worst case scenarios about they're going to be loud, they're going to trash the house, they're going to steal the car. I mean, just outlandish stuff. And I could not stop my mind. It just went like crazy. And that all just switched off. And it was anxiety. I couldn't go out to restaurants except at like 2:30 in the afternoon on a Wednesday when there's nobody in there. And even then I was looking around at cameras and everything else.
Yeah.
I don't have any anxiety whatsoever now. It's just switched off.
Wow.
And it's never come back, Todd, since that particular moment. You haven't felt it creeping back in, or it's just it stayed away.
Yeah, and as we talked before we hit record, I've been off running for about 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. I've gotten a run in like once a week. Like I'd go out and try it, and then I'd shut it down for a week and do that for 4 weeks, and with an injury. And I've been cross training a lot, like an animal, because I did have a little bit of fear that, hey, if I'm not running, everything's going to come back, but it has not. And I think the reason why might have a little bit to do with the cross training, but I think a real big bulk of that is the other side of this, which is the mental work I did, which really, the pinnacle of that work was in writing the book. I'm the kind of person, and I think this is what makes me a good distance runner or ultra runner, is that when I decide to do something, I don't stop until I'm finished. So when I sat down to write the book, and it was tough to write, I'm writing about the most difficult moments of my life. And I did that for a year, for 8 hours a day, and I did not stop until I was finished. So it was like a really long, extended, self-imposed therapy session. And what I got out of that mentally was acceptance and forgiveness and self-knowledge in a way that I never had with anything else. And I've had a fair amount of therapy. So processing all that and moving past it, I think, is a really big factor towards what I'm doing now and how I'm feeling.
Yeah. With the book, because a lot of people say that the most important book you'll ever pick up is your own book, the most important book you'll ever read is your own book, effectively, you know, journaling and writing your own stuff. And me and Dave spoke about that with someone else, another guest that we had on, that said, you know, kind of almost author your future through journaling. But in that time and that discipline to do it, was there moments in that where there was realization moments, motivational moments? Was there breakdowns in the period of writing? Because you're uncovering a lot of stuff in that book, you know, from being a baby, you know, the abandonment of being a baby, and then things that happen with your adopted parents and personal life and family, to the point where you went, I'm going backpacking for 5 years on my own. Like, was there a lot of moments as you were writing that came to you?
Yeah, it was difficult. I think some of the two most difficult things to write about were my childhood, because I was reliving all those traumas and that PTSD on a daily basis. And then the second one was when I went backpacking and left my family and my children behind, because I was out there for a long time and nobody knew if I was alive or dead. And I did almost die several times. That I really struggled with leaving them. I did it because of, I'm not going to spoil the book, but because it's a really pivotal point. But there was another schizophrenic whose actions scared me, and I didn't want to be a danger to anyone. So yeah, those were the two main parts that were really hard. And but like I said, in doing that, I think that a lot of us have a void inside of ourselves, and from a childhood or from whatever it is. And I see this more in men than I do in women. I talk to over 100 people a day now, but I see it more in men than women, where men fill that void with cars or work or running or alcohol or whatever it is. And when I sat down to write that book, that desire to fill that void with anything else went away, because I was sitting in that void, witnessing those dark parts, those truths of myself, and not shying away from them, really looking at them and doing the forgiveness and the acceptance, like I mentioned. And that process was really powerful.
Very interesting. I mean, most people are now going to listen to this and they're going to be buying your book because they need to know the answers.
Yeah.
So good work on that.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to touch on something you said there, Todd, which was obviously part of the book. You don't want to go into it too much, that you witnessed another person with schizophrenia who scared you. Maybe they were violent or something else. And I just wanted to pick up on this, because I think in general, schizophrenia has got a really bad rap about it. There's a lot of negativity attached to it, and potentially violence. And these are the stories that we see on the TV, pretty much. You know, not a lot of people somebody, because it's quite a rare condition. However, can we kind of clear that? Does it make you be violent? What is schizophrenia? If you could explain it to Joe Public.
It's different for every person, and that's one of the things that makes it so difficult to treat and adds to the stigma about it. You know, with depression or with bipolar, there's a lot of similarities between one person to the next, but schizophrenia can be all kinds of different things. There's a version of it called catatonic schizophrenia, where the person just blanks out for an hour and they're catatonic. I have never been violent. I've never even been in a fight at school. But when my schizophrenia rears up, I retreat. I isolate and put on music or play my bass. I do not want anybody around. I don't want anybody noises. I don't want any interruptions at all. And there was a study by, I'm pretty sure it was the New York Times about 10 years ago. And it wasn't specific to schizophrenia, but it was specific to mental illness, that people with mental illness are 10 times more likely to be a victim a violent crime than to perpetrate one, which is pretty telling.
Yeah.
And I think shows like Criminal Minds don't help. I understand it's a show about serial killers, but there aren't any shows out there other than maybe the movie A Beautiful Mind that portray schizophrenia in a different light.
Yeah.
The Soloist is another one, which is a really good movie about a homeless man with schizophrenia. It's really good. I like that one too. But I don't know. I mean, I've entertained the idea that this could be a movie someday. I've had a lot of people say that this book sounds like something they would want to watch. So I've even had people ask me who's going to play me in the movie, but yeah, schizophrenia is difficult, and everybody has different reactions to it. And it's still a mystery. There's not really they're pretty sure it's a chemical imbalance in the brain, but there's new research that shows that schizophrenia is different than something like bipolar, where bipolar is a serotonin kind of chemistry difference in the brain, and same with depression. There's new evidence showing that schizophrenia is more where different parts of the brain are activating when they shouldn't activate. So you're actually like dreaming while you're wide awake.
Okay, yeah.
So, which makes treating it with medication even more difficult. There's not a chemical you can adjust. It's completely, and that's brand new research, but they still don't really understand what's happening. So it's difficult to treat.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting point, because as someone who loves running, into ultra running, you know, I watch a lot of the stars on YouTube, and if you ever kind of listen to, take Courtney Dolewater for example, when she describes, you know, Mohab 240, and she's been awake for that period of time where she's now hallucinating. I think she talks about seeing a black panther in a hammock in a tree. And, you know, she's at a point now where she's at an exhaustion level that her brain is confused. Am I awake? Am I asleep? What am I? It's almost like that's a full circle scenario for what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, I talked to a lot of veterans, and I've talked to some doctors too about my schizophrenia possibly being trauma-based, which is a different type of schizophrenia than genetic schizophrenia. And I was left at a church, like you said, so I have no medical history. I don't know what my genetics, I probably never will know what my genetic history is. So I just have to do what I can with what I have. But trauma-based schizophrenia happens in veterans. It happens when you've been awake for 48 hours. That's a kind of trauma. So it certainly would explain why I was able to, through mental processing and fortitude and running, get to the other side of this. I think that might be a little bit more difficult with genetic, but again, I might have a combination of both. There's no test I can take that'll tell me, so it doesn't matter to me. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing.
What about sleep, Todd? I'm interested to know about sleep, because, you know, we're on that subject. What does sleep look like to you in your life prior to 2023?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was on a sleep medication. I can't say the name of it, but I was on a sleeping medication, not because I had trouble falling asleep, but I would wake up because I'm over 50 years old and I got to go to the bathroom at 3 a.m. And I couldn't get back to sleep because all those intrusive thoughts would come in and I would just be awake. So I would just get up and hit the rowing machine or play bass with my headphones on or whatever until it was time for the family to get up. I don't do that anymore. And that's another thing that stopped with the increase in running and the cessation of my symptoms. I don't take them. I haven't taken that sleeping medication for months, and I don't need it. I still get up to go to the bathroom, but I go right back to sleep, and I'm sleeping deeper My wife got me an amazing watch, and I'm tracking my sleep, and I'm sleeping deeper and have more REM sleep than I used to have. I have very few bad dreams. I used to get them all the time. I think I've had 2 in like 4 months. So I had a big rash of bad dreams when I was getting ready to publish the book, because it was making me very anxious to have my dark moments out there. But I guess I got through that. But sleep has been very good for me recently.
Yeah, it's a big part that I find with running is, as long as I'm not running too late at night, but if I've run in the morning, I just have much better sleep that night. It's just, it just soothes the soul to go to sleep when you've had a good run, you've worked out, Joe Rogan says you earn your sofa at the end of the day if you've worked hard. I say you earn your pillow. You know, you kind of really get to enjoy that time. Flipping it onto what comes next. So you mentioned you've got a 100-mile race coming up in January. So you know, what's going through your mind with that challenge? You know, that is something which a lot of people would look at and go, well, I don't even like to drive 100 miles. That's normally what people say to me.
Tell me that,
yeah. So what's going on in your head? Like, what are you feeling about that? Are you excited? Are you nervous? Are you apprehensive? Are you scared? Is it all of the things? What's going through your head with that?
I'm tremendously excited. I am. I can't wait. And I have a little bit of nervousness, but you know, I've done my research and done my, you know, in base level training, good foundation going, and my long runs are going really well. Mentally, I don't think I'll have too much trouble with it. I'm going to break it down into small parts. Physically, this will be my first time in 100 miles. It'll be my first time over 50. But I've got a good pacing strategy going in, and it's a really flat course. So one of the things I'm worried a little bit about physically is switching muscle groups, because it's gonna be like running on a pancake for 21 hours or however long it takes me to run it. So I'm gonna. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I'm gonna work in some tempo stuff in the race just to speed up a little bit and slow down a little bit and do some walking and speed up again, just to break up the repetition of going at the same pace on a flat surface for so long. But I'm tremendously excited. Where this is all going is I am really looking towards tying my purpose, in which is being an advocate for mental health, and using that purpose and the race as a combined platform going forward. There was a television network in Florida, MHTN, that did a remote interview of me, for the same purpose, to hear my story. And they're in Orlando, and the race is in Lakeland. So the day after the race, I'm going to hobble into the studio and do an in-studio follow-up, and I'm very excited about that. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a challenge. I know I'm up to it, and my amazing wife is going to be there crewing. I've had I announced this race a while back, and I get over 100 messages a day since my book came out, and I finally had to put a post up that said I am not looking for crew or pacers, because running for me has always been a very solitary thing, and that this will be my first race in a while. And the reason why is because with my schizophrenia, I struggled being around people. I don't now, but I did for a long time. And running has always just been a solitary thing for me. So I don't have to worry much anymore about the paranoia or the anxiety about being around people. But if I could run a sanctioned race all by myself, I would do it.
I hear you on that. I'm exactly the same as that. I love the support that you get at certain events, but sometimes it's nice just to do you. And I think one of the great things that's very different about ultra running to marathons and half marathons and stuff like that is, if you've done the base level training, like you say, it's the mental challenge, it's problem solving, because nothing goes to plan in a 100-mile race.
Right.
You know, it just doesn't. And can you solve those problems on your feet when you've been running for 75 miles and you're, you know, 18 hours in and you're tired? And can you find the answers? And that's the exciting part of what you get with ultra running, that you just don't get anywhere else. And when I did my first 100-mile race, and you will complete it because you've got a purpose and you've got a mindset to do it. But the thing that got me through my first one was I just constantly had the saying going through in my head, which was legacy cannot be bought, it must be earned. And that was my thing that just kept going. No one can buy what I'm going to do today. It doesn't matter how rich you are. You have to earn the right to say you've run 100 miles. And I think because you've got this kind of inspirational feeling of what you want to kind of do with people that struggle, to inspire them, that's what will mean you'll cross that finish line. I've got no doubt about it. And yeah, there'll be some dark moments for sure, but I'm sure you'll reminisce on those as a real positive sort of moment in the race for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
In terms of the book and, you know, your mission and your purpose, obviously the vehicle for you really now is the media and the book and the races and the PR, but a deeper point, you want to impact, you know, as many people as possible that potentially are struggling or would benefit from hearing your story. So what would be the kind of, if you had someone on the phone, you know, this afternoon or tomorrow, what would be the advice that you would be giving someone in that situation that's looking for answers, that's looking for help?
I would suggest, you know, obviously going to the hospital if you need to, but one of the things that really helped me that was outside of the obvious, which is the medical community, getting a good doctor, getting on medication, was the support of my wife. And I've made this point over and over. It doesn't have to be a romantic situation. It wasn't for her and I for a while. We were committed to just being friends. But just having that support of a sister or a neighbor, or it doesn't matter. And more than the support of somebody saying, hey, you're doing a great job, or, you know, keep going, that's great. But what I love most about my wife's support is she will turn to me and say, hey, you know, you could do a little bit better with this, or what you did last night was not really in the direction you want to get going to. And those things are hard to hear, especially for somebody who had a mother that was very berating and verbally abusive. But I hear them now with love, and I know she wants me to be the best version of myself. And I know that if she was just all fluff and rainbows, the chances of me being that are less. So find someone that is willing to say the hard things, not all the time, but once in a while in a constructive way, and help you get through them. My wife has done that so much. I had a lot of I'll give you an example. I had a lot of PTSD. I lived in an apartment and I had hallucinations where people were breaking in my front door, like repeatedly in the middle of the night, during the day. I mean, it just happened all the time. And it fooled me every time. So for quite a while, when our daughter or my wife or anybody else would come to the door, they had to call before they just came in. Even that they lived there, they still had to let me know they were on their way. Because when I heard that door unlocking, I thought, oh, you know, I flashed back to that apartment. I don't do that anymore. I don't have that requirement. But her encouragement and support to get me through that process of letting go of that trigger and confronting it and being okay with people just coming in was something that I wouldn't have gotten if she would have just laid back and not said anything or not been constructive in my growth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, very, 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 very powerful when you've got someone that's prepared to be, I guess, honest with you, not just tell you what you want to hear, but be honest with you and remind you of your purpose and your mission, and honest with connecting it to that is very, very powerful feedback. You've mentioned music quite a few times, so I just thought I'd touch on that because you mentioned it in the book as well. I don't know, I'm getting a feeling that music is a plaster and running has been almost the medication. I don't know whether I've got that wrong, but music has helped quite clearly, but it didn't get to the solution that running did. But talk to me about music in your life, because it's something you've mentioned quite a lot.
Yeah, music played a big part before running grew into what it did. Running got me to where, or music got me to where I could run further away from the house. There's a lot in the book about that, how that process happened. Music for me has always been a place where I can go from the dark parts of my childhood. I could go to music, and throughout my adult life, I can go to music. I played concerts for hallucinations. Once I realized what they are, I figured, well, I might as well, entertain them. It sounds goofy, but it was easier to deal with them if I was actually playing and pretending that they were here to hear me play. I wasn't able to do that with all my hallucinations. Some of them are pretty insidious, but music does some of what running does mentally in a different way. I play fretless bass, which is tricky enough as it is, but what the music that does it for me the most is to play my bass along with Brad Meldau or artists like him. He's a very complex musician. He plays a lot of weird scales and weird rhythms. He's very hard to play along with. And that mental activity I needed to keep up with what he was doing. It's almost like if you were solving a difficult algebra equation. It's tough to think about doing anything else while you're doing that. You can't read a book while you're doing that. You can't really talk to somebody while you're doing it. I mean, I can't. So it redirects my brain. And I talk to a lot of caregivers, especially now with working with my second book being in the works, is caregivers struggle with how to help the people they're caring for. And one of the things I always offer to them is distraction. And that's what music was for me. It was a distraction. Running is more of a push through, outrun it. Music was more of, it's going to be here no matter what I do, because I hadn't really discovered that running power yet. So what am I going to do to occupy my mind and not think about the guy throwing knives at the wall? So that's what music did. And the more complicated the music was, the better.
Makes sense. It makes total sense, because it's something that's a reset. It's distracting. It kind of gives you the ability to focus in one area to achieve something, by the complex nature of what you're doing as well.
Yeah.
Dave, before I'm going to just keep talking running all night if you want me to, but do you want to add anything else in, Dave?
I knew that this was going to happen. As soon as I got two runners on a podcast, I thought I'm going to be sat in the corner absolutely listening to this story, because I don't run at all. I don't run baths, let alone run marathons or half marathons. No, it's just been really, really interesting to hear, Todd. I mean, I've got a few questions. Mine are not on the running side. Mine are more about the psychological side, and some questions that have come up to me. I'm just curious. We were just talking today, the guys within Project Peak Performance, that we did another podcast, and one of the things on there was environments, belief systems, and we were really trying to break down on it. And one of the questions came to me was, what was, if you can remember, it wasn't that long ago now, but when you were in the midst of the troubles and the schizophrenia was at its highest peak along with the PTSD, what was the belief system you had about yourself in that moment? And the next question is, what's the belief system about yourself today? Who did you believe you was back then? And is that the same? And who do you believe you are today?
I'm going to go all the way back to when I was 25 and my schizophrenia first presented. I was in the dark, and, there wasn't much information about it at all. And I was scared out of my wits, and my brain kept going back to the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, because that was what came up. I didn't really have any other resources. And I thought I was losing my mind, and I was pretty convinced I was going to be locked in an institution forever. And I know now that would not have been the case. And certainly leaving on a backpacking trip was probably not the best decision. I know it wasn't. Getting help and going to a hospital would have been a much better choice, and my life would have probably gotten better a lot sooner. So that it was like my brain was hijacked in a way where at that time, because of my upbringing and my childhood, I kept everybody at a distance. I worked a lot, and then I would, back then I was running 100 miles a week. So I was gone. I would come home from work and hit the road and be gone for 3 more hours, and get up the next day and do it all again. And I was keeping everybody at a distance, and running was a negative back then for everybody in my life. And I guess it was for me too. My schizophrenia brought all that to a halt, and I was afraid to tell anybody what was going on because I thought I was going to get locked away. So I suffered in silence, and to everybody in my life, I just withdrew and started acting erratically and drinking more. And nobody, you have a person that has a really good job and is running 100 miles a week and plays with his kids and doesn't seem to have too many issues. And then all of a sudden he just completely stops everything he's doing, can't hold a job, and doesn't run anymore and drinks more. And it's just, they didn't know what was happening. And it was a really rough time. What was the second question? I'm sorry.
Sorry, no, it was more about, who did you believe you were? So back then at 25, I'm assuming with what you're telling me there is you kind of, you thought you were broke, you believed you were broke, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I wanted to know, like, what was the internal belief system for Todd at 25 kicked off? And then you have a new perspective today, or is it still the same?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, and I'm glad I asked, because and I was broken, and I grew up, this ties into a lot. I grew up with someone, a parent, my mother, telling me I was going to be a failure every day, all day long. And so when, I got a really good job after college and was, on top of the world as far as that realm is concerned. And when that all unraveled and this started happening, I felt like she was right, that I had failed and I was broken, and that was the end of me. I had lived down to everything she told me I would. And it was crushing. It was horrible. That, ironically enough, that ties into where I am now, because if there's one silver lining to my childhood, it's that beratement of failure turned into a will that's so impossible to defeat. Because if I'm playing bass, I practice so much, it's impossible for me to fail. Because when I was playing bass, I started getting into bands. I not only had to learn the music and then figure out how I was going to beat my anxiety and be in front of people, but I had to do that knowing the possibility that I could start having hallucinations during a show, and I had to keep going. So I had to practice so hard I could get through all of that without mistakes. But that will to not fail was instilled so young, and it's more powerful than ever now. So where I am now is more than just running races and being an advocate and writing books and helping people. Helping people is the whole reason why I'm doing all of this. That's why, because I know if I had had a voice like mine or a book like mine 26 years ago, I would have taken a completely different path. I know that completely. And I'm not building myself up. I'm just saying, I know that if there was a book out there that gave me hope or told me what to do, I would have done it. So when my daughter has events, she's a cheerleader, and we go to them, inevitably the grown-ups are talking. And the second question they ask, sometimes the first question they ask, is, what do you do? And for a long time, I had no answer other than, I survive day to day in a war zone created by my own mind. Well, you say something like that to someone and they're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. But that's where I was. And I was, trying to avoid long hospital stays to save my life is where I was. And now, even if I still had symptoms, if somebody comes up to me, I say I'm an advocate for mental health. I'm an author, and I'm a speaker. I'm a husband. I'm a father. And I have that purpose. And I think a life without purpose is really tough.
Yeah. That's a perfect way to kind of summarize it. I think for all walks of life, that when you find what you're really trying to bring as your purpose within your life, everything becomes way more aligned, way more focused. Motivation becomes irrelevant because you're driven. And yeah, it's a really kind of powerful way to wrap it up. And I found your post in Runners Love Running, where you took a selfie out there in the middle of the night, and you just opened up to the world and said, I've got schizophrenia. Running and music are my refuge. 2 years ago, I barely left the house. Now I'm playing bass at weekly shows and running in the dark. I'm really proud of how far I've come. Be well, everyone. And that's had 103,000 likes and 2,500 comments and nearly 700 shares. And it shows evidentially that you've been kind of real and open and honest with people, with a smile on your face as well. And the running community has embraced that massively by the looks of just that post a year ago. So yeah, I guess from mine and from Dave's point of view and the rest of the guys in the project, thanks for coming on. Thank you for being truly honest with your story, inspiring a lot of people. Good luck with your 100-mile race, and maybe I'll see you in Scotland, at the Sky Race, if that does happen as well. And keep on inspiring, keep on doing what you're doing, and well done for the transition in your life that you've made. Not everyone manages to do that, and I'm sure people listening to this will take inspiration from that, and hopefully others will be able to as well. So yeah, thank you very much, Todd.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on, and your words. And that, I get that all the time, where people read posts like that and come back, and it's the response from especially the running community has been unbelievable. I was pretty anxious about having my book out there because, it'd be like having a therapy session on the internet. And the response has been so positive and empowering. I'd do it all over again every year, every month if I had to. And I do now. I share that with people all the time.
That's brilliant, mate. Honestly, Todd, thank you for taking the time out and coming on to speak to us.
Absolutely.